evening, I think we have a very interesting subject, which we hope you will find a key to many questions that may have arisen in your own mind. We are studying the symbolical mathematics of the Pythagoreans. And I'd like to say just a word about the descent of this tradition. We know, for example, that after the scattering of the Pythagorean school, much of this thinking fell to the keeping of the Platonic Academy. And in the Statesman, the Republic, and other dialogues, Plato introduces a number of mathematical formulas, which he does not explain because he has an oath. That is, he was an initiate of the state mystery. But through the study and restoration of the Pythagorean theory of numbers, many of the very abstruse inferences in the Platonic writings become more understandable. Later we find Plutarch, strongly influenced by the Pythagorean thinking, which he refers in his various writings, including his celebrated treatise on Osiris, Isis, and the gods of Egypt, and in his other interesting work on the other face of the moon. We know also that there was a powerful and impressive restoration of Pythagorean number in Alexandria during the period of Neoplatonism, and that this restoration was headed by Theon of Smyrna, a very great philosopher and mathematician, who gathered most of the available Pythagorean fragments and preserved them for the posterity. Later, Hypatia of Alexandria succeeded to the chair of mathematics, and prior to her martyrdom, has the distinction of being the greatest woman mathematician in the history of the world. From the time of the collapse of the Neoplatonic and Neo-Pythagorean sects in North Africa, there was an almost complete loss of interest in this abstruse subject until the rise of the great family of Medici in Italy, which brought with them the restoration of the Platonic Academy. The work is exemplified in such pioneer and creative thinkers as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. These men, in their canons of proportion, like Cesariano in his edition of Vitruvius, called heavily for architectural principles, anatomical design and structure from the early Greek philosophy. There was a restoration of interest in these subjects at Cambridge University during the period of Dr. Moore, and we had what are known as the English Platonists. Later, at the close of the 18th century, there was a grand revival under the leadership of Mr. Thomas Taylor in London, the last of the great Platonists, sometimes referred to as the last of the pagans. Taylor's work on mathematics includes his theoretic arithmetic, which is perhaps one of the scarcest and most valuable texts on the Platonic arithmetic. So we have in the Western world some descent of these principles, and we find them useful wherever philosophy and science meet. And we also find that they are the principal instruments by which science is today extending itself into the unknown dimensions of space. Without arithmetic and its attendant sciences, we may say that man would have a very inadequate perspective. He would have neither clocks nor timetables. He would have no essential knowledge of genealogies or chronologies. And all incidents of history would lose their perspectives and their relationships. So man, whether he realizes it or not, is constantly using mathematics, either instinctively or as a result of accomplishment. So this evening we want to extend our thinking a little further by discussing one of the most important of all the Pythagorean formulas, and that is the so-called 37th proposition of Euclid. Now, a great many of you are acquainted with what has been called the carpenter's theorem. It is a very simple and very mysterious equation. And because of its intense symbolic interest to us, it seems that we should examine it and study it with some care. Before we do so, however, let us go back to a symbol which we discussed briefly in an earlier talk, namely the symbol of the dot and the circle. The dot and the circle gives us a primary symbolic figure to represent the three principal parts of the universe, or, as the Pythagoreans would have called it, the three principal parts of the divine nature. In the center is the dot, which to these ancient scholars and philosophers was an appropriate symbol of God. Therefore, center and God became more or less related symbols. The second important element is the imaginary line by the extension of the dot, which brings into existence the concept of radius. A circle is a center, a radius, and a circumference. Now, the radius to these peoples represented a middle distance or a middle ground between the center and the circumference. And by the circumference, they represented matter, or a hypothetical circle enclosing as a vessel the process of creation. Thus they had a center and a circumference, spirit and matter. And between these two an extended radius or line, which was their monochord, the thread with one end attached to heaven and the other to the earth, upon which they created their great scientific theorem of the music of the universe. So we have a threefold division in the concept of man. This threefold division has existed from most primitive times, and among many all ancient peoples we find the gradual emergence of a religious trinity. This trinity, which in Christendom is called Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit, occurs in nearly all other major religious theories. In India, we have the Trinity composed of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And in the Buddhistic concept, we have the Trinity consisting of Buddha and then the two polarizations, wisdom and compassion. So truth, wisdom, and compassion become, so to say, the primary Trinity in Buddhistic thinking. In the Persian philosophies, we also have the establishment of a triadic concept of being. And therefore, as Plutarch tells us, it was customary in ancient times to symbolize the divine nature in itself as an equilateral triangle. This equilateral triangle, the first letter of the Greek word for deity, also occurs in many religious and philosophical systems as a proper and appropriate emblem of deity. It so occurs on the reverse of the $1 bill of the United States, where it creates or forms the apex of a pyramid, and within the triangle itself is the all-seeing eye, the proper symbol of the divine being. For it is said that the God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And in the ancient Kabbalah we are told that the great being, the eternal God, has eyes but no eyelids, because he never sleeps. An interesting symbolical thought, anyway. That equilateral triangle, while it represents the essential triune nature of deity, fails to emphasize a certain factor which the Pythagoreans came to recognize. In this equilateral triangle and the four-faced symmetrical solid, or the tetrahedron, all faces or all angles are equal. Now, in the Pythagorean thinking, this was not true of the nature of deity. Had all natures and parts of deity been eternally equal, there could not have been any end to the principle of equilibrium. And things which are in all parts equal lack the dynamic which arises from the stress of inequalities. Therefore, in the Pythagorean philosophy, deity in itself, in its own nature, is equal, but in its manifestation must always be unequal. Consequently, for the God that is mortal to man, that being which is essentially cognizable by its attributes or its forces, there must be a symbol suitable to interpret the inequality of divine manifestation in nature. To achieve this, the Pythagoreans devised the concept of the right-angle scaling, or a triangle which was not an equal or equilateral triangle. In a scaling, a right-angle scaling, there is one right angle and two acute angles. Therefore, the triangle is not perfect, but has its sides of unequal lengths. But in the case of the right-angle scaling, there is one true right angle. This became to the Pythagoreans an appropriate symbol of the ways in which the powers of deity variously manifest on different levels of existence or being. Now, in the divine nature, we have a series of analogies which can be communicated to all the planes of human life. For example, we have three essential powers represented by the Trinity. These essential powers have variously been symbolized by the different races and peoples of the world in their religions and in their philosophies, creating a series of triads. These triads not necessarily merely comprehending the essential nature of deity in abscondita, but of deity in objective manifestation. The ancients, therefore, conceived of a triangle or of a triune manifestation, which they considered as consciousness, intelligence, and force. Now, consciousness, intelligence, and force are not equilateral in their manifestation. On the same basis, we have another important triad, consisting of mind, matter, and form. Now, mind and matter, in their relationships to form, are not equilateral. We have another important triad, consisting in man of spirit, soul, and body. Spirit, soul, and body are not regarded as equal. And certainly, in philosophy and theology, body would not be regarded as equal to soul. And soul, in turn, would not be considered as equal to spirit. Therefore, a triangulation of these qualities could not be equilateral. We have another important concept also. We have the concept of God, nature, and man, a very important one, which has been especially philosophized upon by the Chinese, who have gone to great extent in their study of this subject. And when the Ikonomo and Nirvana schools of Japanese flower arrangement came into existence, we had an interesting example of this triadic symbolism, because the basis of all flower arrangement lies in the recognition of the three parts of the universe, heaven, earth, and man. Wherever you find a painting by a reputable Oriental artist, you will find heaven, earth, and man. You will find sky. You will find a little waterfall or a tree broken against the edge of the painting. And somewhere you will find a little cottage or a house or a little boat or a sail or something that signifies or suggests man. We must have this triform division. And in the paintings themselves, you always have heaven, earth, and man in the very boundaries of the picture. You will always have heaven above as a wide border to the painting, as the one over there. You will have earth below as a much narrower border, which you cannot see, because it is behind the couch. And between the two, you will have the painting, and that is man. Now, when we know the picture, we put the wide border below and the narrow border at the top. But then again, we are much more materialistic than the Chinese. Therefore, to us, matter is much more basic than it is to them. To their minds, earth is the least part, heaven the greatest. To us, earth is a rather greater part, and heaven is a rather an abstract and hoped-for thing without any very clear definition. So when an artist prepares to paint, he creates the pattern of heaven and earth and paints between these two extremes, because he is man, he is the painter, and the painter is the product, and the painting itself is the product of the mingling of heaven and earth. Why? Because heaven and earth are spirit and body of the artist unite to create soul, and soul becomes the painter of the picture. Therefore, we have these trinities, wherever we have philosophy developing its proper forms and patterns. In this concept, then, of heaven, earth, and man, we also have in the flower arrangement the flower, which is heaven, the leaf, which is earth, and the bud, which is man. And these must always be some way combined. And we have rocks, and we have little pieces of wood, and we have blossoms, and we have moss, we have all kinds of elements that are combined, always, however, to signify the relation of the three primary parts of the universe. As Goethe tells us in Faust, the man is suspended twixt heaven and earth, dominion wielding. So man becomes a very important and wonderful symbol. Not just the human being with his little personal arrogances and things of that nature, but man as a concept. Man as the child of heaven and earth. Man is the being who exists because of the union of two great principles in space. Man himself, bearing witness to these principles which are locked within him, which disappeared in his constitution, and do not again visibly or immediately manifest themselves. So we have another Pythagorean triad, father, mother, child. And the universe consists of father, mother, child. And these three are the basis of family. And family is the basis of society. And society is the basis of civilization. And civilization is the primary motion of man toward the improvement of himself. All so-called civilization is an expansion or growth of potentials within life. Now when we look at the child, we can say, where are the father and mother? They have vanished, they have disappeared. And the father and mother may never understand the child, and the child may never understand its parents. But somewhere in that child, there is the inevitable chemistry of father and mother. Just as in water, the hydrogen and oxygen have lost their apparent identity, and a new element results. So in the universe, all of the great creating and created polarities unite to produce a progeny. And this progeny we call symbolically soul, or soul power. So we come back to a very interesting problem that comes very close to a great many human beings, and that is the study of soul itself. We have very little knowledge of the term as it is used broadly, generally, and rather loosely in our modern language. We hear much about the soul. We hear of people who are good souls and others with kindly souls, and others with miserable souls. And we hear also of the hope of the soul for salvation, and the soul that sinneth shall die, and all of these things. But just what the soul is, the book never gets around to telling us. And so it has variously been identified with spirit, or with mind, or with consciousness, or even on a scientific level, simply with force or energy as a moving or animating principle. But in the Pythagorean theory, we have a whole group of parallels which define each other, and the slow emergence of what we may term the principle of analogy, by means of which we gain an understanding of one thing by studying its counterparts, or its equals, or its similitudes in other things. In the Pythagorean mathematics, then, we have spirit, matter, and form. And these become more or less a basic trinity, or a basic triad. And in this concept, spirit and matter, as father and mother, generate the principle of form. Now, at the moment, most people think of form and body as identical. And certainly they would say that bodies are forms, and forms are bodies, and that forms are built out of matter, and therefore that perhaps forms are merely complex patterns of matter. This is all right as far as it goes, but it leaves something out. It leaves out this thing which we have previously referred to as the numerative power of God. Because a form is a compound. All forms consist of two or more principles or energies, of which one of these principles is matter and the other is order. A form cannot exist of itself alone, and things which do not have a cohesive principle or an archetypal design inherent in them fall apart, because their forms are matter held together by binders, and the binders in these cases are archetypal designs. Therefore, Pythagoras might have been fairly well stating it when he said that a form is a combination of mind and matter. Perhaps this is one of the simplest ways in which we can define it. Because the matter itself supplies the substances, but not the design. Therefore, a body must consist not only of material elements, but of an archetype, a drafting plan, a drawing or design, some principle, some power, which, as in the case of the snowflake, or of the small microorganism, which is a magnificent mystery of geometrical order, that all things consist, all forms consist of matter and mind, or matter and organization. Therefore, a form must consist of some chemistry of consciousness and unconsciousness, of things in themselves immovable and of things moved. So Plato gives us three orders of energies, in which he says that the lowest is that which is moved, or that to which motion is imparted, and in which motion itself is not inherent. The second, or higher form is called self-moving, in which the energy of motion is called inherent, or the being or creature moves of itself. And the third, or highest, is called the unmoved mover, that which bestows motion upon all other things, yet is itself unmoved. The unmoved mover is obviously God. The self-moving is man, or the soul, and the moved is nature, or matter. Therefore, man will take various material elements and mold them into a dish or a cup. He moves them because they are not self-moving. Man, however, is self-moving because from an idea within himself he is capable of molding this cup for himself. He is able to build himself houses and cities and towns. He is also able to move from place to place and able through moral motion to move from condition to condition. He is therefore self-moving. He says, I will go, and he goes. He does not have to depend upon the motion of the winds or of the sea, except in a very negligible degree. The unmoved mover is that which, corresponding to God, extends energy to all things, yet is itself immovable upon its foundations. Therefore, that which being unmoved, yet moves all other things, is supreme and superior. These qualities, again, relate to spirit, matter, and form. Spirit is the unmoved mover of all things. Matter is the moved, and soul or form is the self-moving, or that in which certain power of motion is inherent. It is called self-moving because it is not yet stabilized, and its energies are expended in motion because it exists in a sphere of consciousness in which there is a place to go and a place to depart from, which is not true in the divine nature, which can never depart from itself or go to any place where it is not. This concept, of course, gets into a rather abstract field, but it still has value for us. Then in the study of the Pythagorean proposition attributed to Euclid as his 47th proposition, we have, as we have said, a right-angled triangle, and we make a discovery, namely, that if we place the unit of 3 upon one side of the right angle and the unit of 4 on the other side of the right angle, and we consider 4 to be the horizontal base and 3 the vertical upright, then the hypotenuse, or the line which would extend at a diagonal to unite the terminations of the extremities of the lines of 3 and 4, this line will measure 5. And therefore we have in this right-angled triangle 3 enclosing lines, one of the unit 3, one of the unit 4, and one of the unit 5. The unit 5 being the hypotenuse, or the line necessary to connect the extremities of the line of 3 and 4 at their divergent ends. This combining line, or 5, if we square it, gives us the number 25, and the number 25 is equal to the sum of the squares of the other 2 lines. The square of 3 is 9. The square of 4 is 16. And the sum of these squares is 25, which is equal to the sum of the square of the hypotenuse. This is a peculiar equation because it shows us, for one thing, apart from the design entirely, that the square of 3 plus the square of 4 equals the square of 5, which is the essential point involved. But the mathematical formula for this equation has been variously applied to a great many subjects. Plutarch tells us, for example, that the square of 3, or the line of 3, one side of this unequal triangle, is equivalent to the god Osiris, that the 4 is equivalent to Isis, and that the 5 is equivalent to Horus, the divine child. This is a more or less sociological interpretation of the divine family in Egypt, but it still has importance to us scientifically and philosophically when we begin to understand the meaning of these 3 terms. Osiris, represented by the number 3 and also by the all-seeing eye, which was his glyph in the Egyptian hieroglyphical system, was considered by the Egyptians as a proper symbol of the divine power in its own nature. Isis, the wife sister of Osiris, was the mother of mysteries, the symbol of nature and of the earth. But much more than that, the symbol of the great hierarchical system of initiation. Now, Isis was the temple, was the sanctuary, the secret house, ruled over by the strange, mysterious master of the mysteries. Therefore, Isis is the Virgin of the world, Sophia, Maya, the mother of Buddha, Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Blessed Virgin, Diana, goddess of the Ephesians, the Multimania, the Mata Deorum, the mother of the gods. Now, in this concept also, Isis, on her shrine at Sais in Egypt, had inscribed upon the pedestal of her statue, "My veil no man hath lifted." Isis is not only the wife mother, but also the eternal Virgin of the world, because she is the system of the ancient sacerdotal colleges. She is the soul mother, the alma mater. She is the mother of learning and of wisdom. And her sons are born and come forth out of the womb of her mystery. She gives birth to the adepts, to the learned, to the sages, to the scholars, to the wise, yet like the mysteries remains forever a virgin. The symbolism, therefore, of Isis is far greater and more wonderful than we might first appear to recognize. And when we consider her as the symbol of nature and of the earth, we immediately recognize how the ancients understood this term. For we know that by them the earth simply represented the house of the mysteries. The earth upon which we live and in the environments of which we unfold our various capacities and abilities is the great schoolhouse. It is the place of learning. It is the place of experience. It is the sphere in which we grow and are tried and are tested. And life itself is the great ritual of initiation into the mysteries. Now, out of life, out of growth, out of struggle, out of striving, and out of experience, we have the tremendous adventure of what the Pythagoreans call the acute angle of the right angle scale. Inasmuch as this experience, this struggle for wisdom, contributes one of the footings, or one of the terminals of these meeting and connecting lines relating to the generation of the power of the soul. Osiris, of course, represents in this same pattern heaven, the spiritual roots of things, and most of all, the esoteric doctrine itself, apart from its material institution. In other words, Osiris is the embodiment of truth, the personification of absolute wisdom, absolute strength, absolute will. Osiris, then, is the patron or the master of the house of the mysteries. And the house, or the system of initiation, represents the female counterpart of wisdom itself. In other words, the universal spirit, being the divine energy of all things, impregnates the universe which bears the divine child. Consequently, man is born of heaven and earth. He is born inwardly of the spiritual energies of the creating power, and he is born outwardly of the vast cycles of generation and experience in the mundane sphere. He is born of truth and striving. He is born of reality and experience. He is born of spirit and matter. He is born of an internal mystery locked forever within himself. And he is released through the great experience of growing and learning. The ancients did not believe that when a child was born into this world, it was really conceived by its parents in the highest sense of the word. They provided its body. But the child itself was an immortal being in its own nature and in its own right. Therefore, heaven and earth became the foster parents of the child. And heaven gave it an inner life, and earth gave it a psychic nature and a capacity for growth. These two, then, heaven and earth, bring forth their own witness. For Horus, the divine child, is much more than merely the progeny of heaven and earth. He is more than merely a child to generate and perpetuate an order or kind. Horus is the avenger. Horus is the witness of his own parents. For in Horus, all that is to be attained or achieved by the invisible Father and the essentially invisible Mother, all these things are made manifest. Therefore, whoever has seen this child has seen the parents, because they are in it, and he is in them. And they are essentially one nature in three parts. Now, when we study this concept from the standpoint of the human being, we realize that spirit, or God, and body, or nature, must therefore generate. And the union of spirit and matter produces an interval or power between this mysterious compound which the ancients considered to be the world soul. Now, the nature of the soul, like the nature of the body, is a strange and involved thing. Because while the spark of the soul is bestowed by the divine soul, the Father, this soul must be brought to birth or brought to manifestation through the mystery of the Great Mother. Hence it is that the soul must pass through a certain prenatal epoch. It must be carried in the womb of the mysteries. It must be provided by the mysteries of nature and of the universe with certain materials and energies for its future manifestation. For this reason, the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece were celebrated upon 9 nights, each of these nights representing one of the divisions or months of the prenatal epoch. Later also, we have another interesting definition in the establishment of a triune set of mysteries the 3 degrees of ancient secret schools. For it was said in those times that by 9 months of prenatal life, or during the 9 months of gestation, plus 3 degrees of the mysteries, the perfect human being is born. Man is born falling short, represented in old symbolism by a broken wheel with only 9 of its 12 spokes. Man, therefore, is represented as being conceived and brought to birth through 9 months of prenatal life and 3 degrees of initiation. The result of these 2 is 12, and 12 of the dodecahedron was the Platonic and Pythagorean symbol of the perfect human being. Now, in this problem, then, of the generation of the soul and its relationship to Isis, the great mother of mysteries, we come into some very interesting and constructive thinking. According to the Pythagoreans, the hypotenuse, or the line of 5, which by its square becomes 25, is composed of the union of 2 other numbers. It is composed of 3 and of 2, because the square of 2 is 4. And 4 is one of the lines of the original right-angle triangle. This again involves some rather involved symbolism, but for our purpose, the ancients regarded the mysterious symbol of the soul, the number 5, as generated from 2 and 3 brought together. In other words, it is generated from the deficiencies of the number 2 and the abundance of the number 3. It is composed, therefore, of duality and equilibrium. We heard before in one of the other lectures that the number 2 was the symbol of duality, or of division, and the number 3 of equilibrium. These 2 numbers, then, form the soul, which by nature of its own peculiar relationship is also represented as an oblique line. We mentioned this oblique line before in relation to one of the old mystery cultures, in which it says that the degrees of initiation result in the individual being raised from the horizontal to the oblique, and from the oblique to the perpendicular. The oblique, of course, is the line of the hypotenuse. And, of course, the oblique is the symbol of soul, for its angle is between that of the vertical and of the horizontal. The vertical, obviously, represented to the ancient spirit. The horizontal represented matter, and the oblique represented man. Therefore, man begins to play to a series of analogies. Man becomes identical symbolically with form. He becomes identical symbolically with soul. And in the triad of consciousness, intelligence, and force, he is intelligence. In the triad of creation, preservation, and disintegration, he is preservation. In the term of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, he is Son. He is always the second power of the Trinity, because he represents in each case the point of oblique balance, or the point of polarity between the opposites. Of therefore wisdom, strength, and beauty, he is strength. Of will, wisdom, and action, he is wisdom. Of mind, soul, and body, of course, he is soul. He is whatever this middle quality may be. Creator, preserver, destroyer, he has to be preserved. And as such, he is intimately associated with the messianic mystery wherever it occurs, because he is associated with the second power of the Logos. Now, when we say that man is associated with all these things, we also mean that in some mysterious way, form is associated with all these things. And that form, consequently, is in principle the mysterious agency or quality of which man is the peculiar embodiment. Also that man is strangely and wonderfully the projection into manifestation of soul. Consequently, we must try to understand, at least in part, how the ancients arrived at some of these calculations and why they so distributed these qualities in the universe. Soul, to the ancients, was not what we may consider it today a synonym of spirit. To the ancients, soul was a product of generation. Soul was a being capable of birth, but not normally capable of death. It was therefore something generative, which, having been generative, had an indefinite duration in time. Soul, therefore, originating in body, could survive body. This concept Pythagoras undoubtedly derived from Egypt, where the entire doctrine was ancient long before his time. The Egyptians recognized the soul as a compound entity composed of 7 essential natures or parts, and that the soul of itself was created by the reaction of consciousness upon matter, or the mutual reactions of consciousness and matter. Thus it was called the child of striving. It was born from the mysterious impact of necessity, and soul, to them as a result, was intimately associated with what we term experience. Their experience results from the impact of life upon environment. Therefore, life in this part plays the first person of the Trinity, and environment represents the opposite polarity, and experience becomes the distillation or the progeny of life acting upon matter or environment. The soul, consequently, is a part of the being, which is gradually enriched and accumulated by the processes which the Greeks accepted in connection with the cycles of rebirth. Therefore, what we term the soul is an independent kind of being that grows up through the ages, is a life within man, having a spiritual parent and having a mysterious energy within itself. Soul might therefore be likened to individuality, which is between universality and personality. Universality is life infinitely diffused. Personality is life infinitely restricted or contracted. And between these two is individuality, which is a process in which life gradually conquers environment. Life gradually releases itself through the instruments which it has created. Growth, therefore, is an attribute of the soul and belongs to the number 5, or the hypotenuse, inasmuch as growth must ultimately connect heaven and earth, or bring all opposites and inconsistencies into reconciliation. Growth, therefore, is the square of the 5, which contains hidden within itself the squares of the 3 and 4. In growth, the individual expands until he takes into himself the polarities of his own causation. It is an involved concept, but it tells us a great many interesting things. Let us assume for a moment that at some hypothetical time at the beginning of creation, the spark of life, which we call man, came into existence. This spark of life was the Osiris self, the divine monad. This was the numeration of man, which was to precede the extension of man through the cycle of the numbers. This spark, this divine seed, or as Pythagoras called it, this seminal essence, fell into the darkness of matter, its polarized opposite. And there it remained in the darkness through the great sleep of the gods, until, in the dawn of the new day of manifestation, the light of heaven and the moisture of the earth, Osiris and Isis, light and moisture, energy and humidity, release the power of the germ. Here the 3 and the 4, by their union, as heat or light and moisture, result in the loss of their own identities within a new being, and the generation of man takes place. Now, this first primordial man was a very simple creature, and probably for many, many millions and hundreds of millions of years had no awareness of its own existence. During this time, however, and we can study minute and elementary creatures today to have some concept of the process, gradually the first power of the soul began to be released within the creature itself. And that first power of the soul, according to the Greeks, was the impulse to survive. It was the impulse to escape destruction, the impulse to preserve self in some strange and intangible manner. We find this impulse, as the Indian scientist Biscay observed, the Nobel Prize winner, we find this impulse even now in carrots and radishes and beets. We put them on a delicate electrical machine and we approach them with heat or a dangerous instrument. And although our eyes cannot see it, the instrument shows that the poor little beet or the squash or the radish tries to escape. It tries to the extent of emotion so minute that only electrical amplification can reveal it. But still, within it somewhere, it is aware of danger. It wants to live. So in the earliest experiences of life, creatures begin to develop something that is neither spirit nor matter. But this power, this gradually growing incentive to survive, this was regarded as one of the primary aspects of the soul, for the reason that the impulse to survive is not present in the divine nature because it is indestructible. It does not need to survive. It cannot be assailed. It cannot be destroyed. Nor does the instinct to survive exist in pure matter, because pure matter is without recognition of its own existence. Therefore, pure matter, absolute negation, has no instinct to survive because it has no quality of survival. except that which is bestowed upon it. It has no awareness. It has no concept of growth. Nor is there any limitation. It's susceptible of fear or anxiety within the divine nature. Therefore, this creature, because it is a separate thing, and because it is a compound, an alchemical mystery, because the three sides of the Pythagorean proposition are believed by the alchemists to represent the proportions of salt, sulfur, and mercury necessary in the production of the philosopher's stone. Thus, the philosopher's stone being so in itself, of which in the alchemical mystery mercury is the symbol, we have the dawning of something within this compound of spirit and matter, universal spirit, universal matter, uniting to generate individual and particular seedlings in space. These seedlings, because they have a separate existence, urge toward their own causes, or seek to escape from their own negations, or aspire towards the unfoldment of their own potential, because they are separate or distinct from the original nature itself. They are a generation in which the polarities are obscured, and these creatures are not aware of their own relationships to causes. In numberless cases, these primordial forms disappeared. These primitive structures were destroyed or vanished away in the limbo of ancient time. The only thing that survived them was this something that was gradually building within them, this psychic energy, which was not destructible with their bodies. And within bodies there then developed a formal principle. And this formal principle, reacting upon bodies, began to modify form or bodies, so that by degrees bodies became merely vestments built around archetypes. And the archetype was, of course, the gradually unfolding conscious experience of the being itself. Thus man in his growth gave birth in the beginning to a psychic principle. And this psychic principle continued and was inherited from life to life and passed from body to body. And through the millions of years through which man has passed, this psychic principle has enriched. It has become capable of increasing independence of existence. This psychic principle is not man's spiritual nature derived from God, nor is body derived from the earth. This psychic nature is derived from the motion of a life through time, through environment. And constant reaction to environment has resulted in the existence of another factor called heredity. And heredity is nothing more nor less than ages of environment conditioning creatures. Therefore, what we call heredity is nothing but ancestral reaction to environment. So all things are moved from without and worked upon from without by environment, which is the number 4, and are worked upon from within by consciousness, which is the number 3. And this combination is forever intensifying or enlarging the fivefold nature of the soul itself. So as time goes on, the soul develops qualities and attributes. It survives from life to life and expands from life to life, until it assumes gradually in the more highly civilized being the proportions of the Gnostic anthropos, or Emerson's overself, or oversoul. It is the soul which through experience grows and drags the body with it. It is the soul's own energies which are forever causing it to build more and noble mansions for itself. The soul, once it has begun this journey, becomes the reincarnating end. It becomes the gradually growing person in the body. And this person casts off worn-out bodies and takes others. And each time it is embodied, it is not the personality, but the soul which grows. It is not John Doe in his present life with his bank accounts and his debits and credits and his domestic difficulties that is the essential point. John Doe will go back to the earth, but the experiences through which he passed become part of the immortal wealth of the soul itself. So by degrees, this soul is attaining to a diversity of achievement. It is absorbing art and music and literature. It is becoming wise in sciences and gracious in artistry. It is becoming compassionate and loving, unselfish. It is seeking ever more the refinement of its own nature. It aspires to truth and causes the body gradually to become the servant of the psychic life within. Therefore, if we will say that the human being in the course of a certain number of physical lives, say roundly 800, passes through a great cycle which is called the earth cycle, these 800 lives together constitute the single lifetime of the soul. And the soul passes from infancy to childhood, and from childhood to adolescence, and from adolescence to maturity, and from maturity to age, over great periods of time. Because the soul is that part of man which must gradually accumulate and amass all of the infinitely diversified mystery of phenomena. It is that thing which, in order to be complete, must experience all things, must pass through every conceivable condition and state, and must therefore ultimately, it is said, release totally the potential of the divine seed which was planted in the beginning. For that which comes from deity and is hidden in nature is gradually revealed and released until it blazes forth in the fullness of its total accomplishment. This concept, then, is that within man himself grows, as Bainey called it, the soul plant, that has its root in the heart, and which continues to grow until it becomes a great and wonderful palm tree in the desert, marking the oasis, or the place where the waters of life forever flow. A very beautiful and poetic simile. If then the soul, representing the hypotenuse, proceeds at an oblique angle over the great cycle of periods of birth and death, while men pass from physical maturity to age and death and are born again, the soul advances gradually, or as the philosopher Apuleius says, with a swaying and eccentric motion. The soul does not immediately ascend or descend, but continue in various conditions according to the relation of soul to body and body to consciousness. At the early periods of its life, or its evolutionary growth, the soul in man is practically embryonic. It is merely preserved and protected within the body. Gradually it comes to be quickened, and finally, in the human being, normally speaking, it has been born. That is, it has come to an individual and independent existence within the life of man. From that time on, it must pass through all the stages with which we associate growth, whether of visible or of invisible things. And in its courses of growth, it is in a state of more or less constant conflict with body, not because body is bad, but because, as the Greek said, matter is an obscuration, an intoxication, a toxic association. And while the soul is completely within the control of body, it remains darkened and immature, for it must struggle for its survival against the encroachments of matter and of materiality in general. Now the soul, however, as it grows, does not grow immediately to perfection. For the soul in its early development is intimately associated with matter. Therefore, while it is in conflict with matter substantially, it is not in conflict with matter from the standpoint of experience. Primitive man, in his experience, used every native capacity that he had to attain the material objectives of his life. In other words, he used his skill in hunting and fishing, in outwitting his enemies, and in finding a place to live, in protecting his children, and gradually building a tribal or cooperative existence. Therefore, all of his psychic resources were objectified. And according to Pythagoras, what we call civilization is a pattern. And this pattern is the objectification of the soul into the environment of man. Thus, all external things are souls made flesh or made formal. Institutions, laws, codes, everything that we know is in some way an objectification of the mathematical formula of the soul, inasmuch as the soul is the archetypal image, the long shadow of which extends down into matter. But because it is a reflection, this shadow is distorted and imperfect, and not to be compared with the essential nature of the soul itself. There comes a time in the gradual growth of the individual when the soul, having matured, having gradually come to certain internal realizations of values as the result of experience and as the result of the lessons taught by conflict with environment, the soul begins to become a more and more integrated, organized, and dominant force in the character and temperament of the person. This means that ultimately, as Plato has pointed out, the soul becomes the teacher, inasmuch as the soul must overcome and civilize everybody that it builds. The soul must gradually possess its body and take over the functions of body and direct body to the attainment of purpose. The greater the luminosity and power of the soul, the more useful and energetic the body will appear to be, inasmuch as the body's primary purpose is to serve as the instrument of the soul in the condition of matter. And the body has, therefore, no essential purpose of its own. it is that which must be moved, because it is the soul within it which is the self-mover. And we begin to appreciate this dimension of the Socratic and Platonic definition. The soul gradually gaining greater and greater ability and wiser understanding of things, becomes ultimately the leader of life. The soul, therefore, ultimately takes over and gradually deflects or diverts the attentions of the body to the purposes of the soul. Samson, representing more or less the human soul, was blinded and bound to the millstone of the Philistines. Therefore, the soul, in this sense, is that which is blinded and bound to grind out the material life of the individual. And we use the power of the soul for every selfish and conceited purpose that happens to come to our minds. Little by little, however, the soul power matures. And it is the maturity of this power, which is an unbroken sequence of maturity, which actually results in the evolution of the species or the type. Man has an indwelling or individual soul. Lower kingdoms that we know have collective or group souls, which have not yet passed into individualization. Therefore, species and types have common patterns, but man has an individual pattern. And man is the only creature which is able, of its own will and accord, to violate the laws of its own being. Therefore, man alone, of all creatures known to man, is capable of sin, because sin is a conscious violation of the laws of the spiritual code of life. And to have this power, man must have conscious individuality. The soul, by its various progresses and achievements, thus gradually unfolds the power of both spirit and matter, and draws within itself all of the essences of these things. For the essence of matter is experience, or soul power. And the essence which the soul accepts from God is consciousness, or intuitive apperception, by which the individual soul has a share or intuitive knowledge of its own origin and destiny. Therefore, we have the Gnostic hymn of the Robe of Glory, in which the so-called life journey of man is the soul seeking its own homeland, or the return to its own primary and eternal nature. In the Eastern systems of metaphysics, we have some interesting speculations concerning the nature of the soul. And these speculations include the concept of the adept soul, namely that when, through growth, through discipleship and the disciplines of the mysteries, the disciple reaches the point in which the body is finally mingled with the purposes of the soul, so that there is no longer a qualitative interval between body and soul, and personality has formed its ultimate and permanent union with individuality. And the external person has no life apart from or different from that of the soul. But then the two, the personality and the psychic nature, are blended. And therefore we have the assumption of the Virgin, or the Virgin Mother united forever in the glory of her child. In other words, we have nature or the earth restored in glory in the soul. For then the soul has absorbed from the body or from nature all of its elements and agencies, and has restored them to glory within itself. These symbolical accounts lead also to the concept that at the end of the cycle of incarnation, the ultimate embodiment or physical incarnation does not die, but passes like Enoch into the union with the soul without death. Because at that time the personality and the soul are so identical that the two are united in one inseparable union. At that time, however, it is the soul which triumphs, and the union of the personality and the individuality is the union of the church and the Lamb, or the union of the body or the material constitution with its own psychic overself. Thus it is said that certain patriarchs walked with God without death, because in this case they represented the final union of the personality and the soul. In the end, then, there has come a very strange and mysterious situation. The individual, believing himself to be a personal being, has gradually moved along, building within himself something that finally takes over, called in the Chinese philosophy the transcendent being. And this transcendent being ultimately becomes the self. And when the self and the transcendent being are one, then man shall know no more of sin or death. Because this soul consciousness, if it is captured consciously, becomes an unbroken continuity for the length of the life cycle. The psychic significance, therefore, is that out of two elements is born an imperishable third principle. And this imperishable principle has a survival in itself, absorbs the polarities into itself, and becomes an immortal being, represented by psyche, or represented by any of the ancient symbols used for that purpose. In the Egyptian ritual of Isis, the number 4, and Osiris, the number 3, by their squares, constituting 25, become identical with the square of Horus the Beloved. In other words, they, in their union, form an exact equivalent, so that the soul, in its maturity, is the absolute and exact equivalent of the sum of heaven and earth. Psychologically, it becomes identical with these elements. And these elements, therefore, in their absolute blending, according to wisdom, will result in the imperishable rose diamond of the Hermetic philosophers, the homunculus, the crystal being, born, as the Hindu says, of will and yoga. This entire concept does give us a clue to the fact that Pythagoras was well acquainted with the Eastern doctrines, and also that he was skilled in the learning of the Orphics and those other mystics of that region and adjacent areas, including Persia and Babylon, where all these teachings had already been long established. Now let us consider this symbolism just a little bit further. We have identified heaven and spirit, earth and matter, man and form. We have recognized also that when we say man, we actually are using the word manas, which means in Sanskrit the thinker. And in this, the actual word man means mind. Therefore, that the fulfillment of man means in some mysterious way the fulfillment of his mental power. Now let us consider mind now as an equivalent of form, because we're dealing with, again, the square of 5, and we have to see where this will lead to. We have already conceived from the level of soul that soul is gradually absorbing all experience into itself. The soul absorbs experience. The mind absorbs something else. The mind absorbs knowledge. Now, knowledge is not essentially different from experience in origin, because experience gives birth to knowledge, and knowledge is the report and record of experience. But when creatures have reached a degree of gradual mental unfoldment, knowledge implies the transmission of certain facts on an intellectual level. It means that the individual increases in knowledge and learning, not always directly from experience, but from authority, from tradition, and from numerous records which are available to him. Learning, therefore, is a kind of vicarious kind of experiencing. It is a benefiting from the experience of others in the process of the unfoldment of our own capacities. It would obviously seem, then, that man's mind has a natural bent, and we can see this bent constantly in his inclinations. For today, particularly at this period in our growth, we observe man reaching out mentally in an effort to grasp the universe, in an effort to circumscribe, bind, and hold all things to himself. The mind of man is seeking, and has always sought, to explore and capture the infinite. The mind of man seeks the victory over the unknown, and the unknown in this case is the entire mystery of creation itself. Thus mind, by its growth, is seeking to eat up the unknown, to transform it into the known, and through this gradually to become master of all things. Thus mind again becomes a symbol of archetypal form. It becomes a symbol of another phase of man's life, of this struggle against limitation, this escape from bondage, this orientation of self in space, which actually is one of the great psychic problems. Mind, as with man, moves objectively as science and subjectively as philosophy. And these motions, either by phenomena, by facts on one level, or by reason, or intuition upon another level, the mind is seeking also to bind the opposite and to free itself from the mysteries of both heaven and earth. This again is a symbol of man as soul gradually gaining ascendancy over polarities and achieving victory over the unknown. Form, mind, man, all these terms also suggest within themselves organization. The formative principle is therefore organization in itself. The universe consists of the divine power immovable, and material or circumference obscurity which is moved but has no motion of itself. And is between these the self-moving agent, which is archetype. Therefore, to the Pythagoreans and the Platonists, archetypes are living patterns, patterns which are self-moving and are therefore capable of an adjustment with matter. They are capable of moving matter and also of moving themselves. Archetypes are the basis of growth, and there are two kinds of archetypes in the ancient symbol. One is the great collective archetype, which in the Pythagorean concept is composed or consists of the number 50. Now it will be observed that 50, by some mysterious law, is analogous to the 50 paths of the Kabbalah. In the Kabbalah there are 50 gates or roads which lead to the ineffable. And it was said in the ancient Jewish law that the secret behind the fact that Moses was not able to enter the land of Canaan was because this land represented the 50th gate, and Moses was only able to pass through 49 gates, the square of 7. The 50th gate was reserved for the Messiah, the one who was to come, who alone could pass through the last of the gates. Now, if we remember for a moment, we will remember that the square of 3 plus the square of 4 plus the square of 5 equals 50. Because we have the 3 and the 4 equaling 25, the square itself of 5 equaling 25, and the sum of these equaling 50. Therefore, these 50 represent the great and complete number, or the complete cycle, 0 added, of the number 5. 5 and the sign of the cycle is 50. In these principles of 50, we also have two peculiarly equal symbols, because we have two numbers, 25. One, the square of 5, and the other, the squares of 3 and 4 together. So that we have an identity established here, which is important. The square of 3 and 4 equal the square of 5, and by their union they produce it. The square of 5 in turn fulfills the square of 3 and 4, and by the union of these three, the number 50 is released into objectivity. And 50, of course, is 5 extended to 10 cycles of itself, or 10 times 5. And 10, of course, is the basic tetractys itself. The 10 revolutions of the 5, then, or cycles of the 5, are here implied. But for our purposes at this moment, let us remember that we can go back to our idea of the 6 sticks, which cease to be 6 separate sticks and bring into existence the compound number 6. The union of the 3 and 4 in their squares produce 25, which is the archetypal pattern of the soul. Therefore, the inevitable mingling of consciousness and matter in the ratio of 3 to 4 results in the spontaneous release or generation of psychic life wherever it may exist. Thus, the 3 plus the 4 equal psychic release. And whenever this energy or this formula imposes itself upon any area of space, the psychic potential of that area is released into objectivity. In other words, a psychic life is born. Because this psychic life is exactly equivalent to this union of the divine nature and its own circumference, or the material deprivation of itself. In turn, also, the number 5, or psychic life, when it is fulfilled, becomes identical with God and nature. Therefore, the perfect soul is restored to the number 25, and therefore becomes identical with the nature of God and nature. Thus, God and nature combine and conspire to create the soul, and the soul in itself, when it is complete, is identical in its totality with the causes which produced it. Thus, there are two ways of achieving the number 25. One by the union of the 3 and 4 and their squares, the other simply by the square of 5 itself. This tells us something else about the nature of the soul. Namely, that while the soul is a compound, it is also a totality. Therefore, the soul has the power for perfection without generation. This is important and is the reason why in the ancient story of the phoenix, which was the symbol of the soul, the phoenix, there was only one in the world at the time, and it gave birth to itself from itself, and was similar in the symbolism, therefore, to Melchizedek, king of Salem, the mysterious priest who first administered the Eucharist to Abraham, and of whom it was said he was his own father and his own mother. And later, St. Paul likens Christ, saying that he is a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. Thus, Melchizedek becomes the soul symbol, the phoenix, because it is capable of achieving the completeness of itself without generation. Therefore, it must be generated. But having once come into existence, continues forever without generation. This is, as you see, because of the way in which the 47th proposition brings it into existence. Namely, that it is generated from the square of the 3 and the square of the 4. But of itself, it is the totality of the sum of these squares. Therefore, for the perpetuation of itself, it requires no further generation, because the 25 is the symbol of the psychic field in its own nature. Thus, the soul, once created, becomes the hermetic androgyne, and the soul, as the modern psychologist knows today, is androgynous, inasmuch as it is the product of the union of polarities. In the ancient Jewish system, the Adam Kadmon, the original prototypic Adam, was actually this psychic androgyne. And the division within the soul into its intellective and emotional parts is represented through the creation of Eve, which is a psychic polarity within the soul, or the division of the soul substance into its natural polarities, the anima and the animus. But in itself, the soul is androgynous, because it contains both the principles of the square of 3, which is male, and the square of 4, which is female. Therefore, it is in its own nature the symbol of the hermetic being, the androgynous Mercury. And why is Mercury used in alchemy for this purpose? The answer being that it is the universal solvent. For Mercury accepts into itself all other substances, or was so believed to do, and reconciles them in its own nature. Thus the soul in the ancient Hermetic writings is said to accept into itself heaven and earth, and to bring them to peace. And in the great conflicts of the universe, sulfur and salt are reconciled by Mercury in the Hermetic allegory, and fire and water are reconciled in the mysterious Hermetic vessel. Hermes, of course, the Egyptian form and Greek form of the Latin Mercury, is himself or itself a personification of the soul. Therefore, it is said that Hermes was the author of 5,000 books, meaning actually that all writings come from the soul. Therefore, the psychic self is the author of all books and the master of all arts, the source of all learning. The soul self is also the teacher. For as the scales of evolution tip, and man moves towards being a soul-moved being, the source of his instruction and information and life comes from within himself, rather than being imposed upon him from without. The soul's being is therefore the teacher, the guide, the leader, the sage, the arhat, the mysterious Mahatma of Indian legendary and lore, the great self. For the word Mahatma itself merely means great soul. And it is the soul's greatness in man which also bears this relationship. Thus the soul, in its own achievement, has been born of polarity, but is not essentially in its own nature polarized. And because it is able to bring a synthesis to polarity, it is capable of a divine apperception that is impossible in divided natures. All parts of man are polarized except the soul, which is only polarized in its generative expression. Actually, within the individual, the psychic life is gradually moving towards a complete equilibrium. And in this equilibrium, when it is attained, the psychic life will have a complete participation, or a balanced participation in the universal mystery. Equilibrium in this case becomes the requisite for internal, mystical, or soul sight, or knowledge, or apperception. Now, in the Chinese concept of the transcendent being, which is produced by meditation and power within the self, the soul is seen to journey like the Taoist genii and fairies out from the body and to travel about in space, floating on a cloud, and often represented in a most comical and delightful manner. It flies about on cranes and birds, and it swims around the sea on the back of fishes and turtles. It really has a wonderful time, all wrapped up and apparently in a great cloth robe or mantle with a very pixie-like expression. It scampers about the world, exploring everything, solving all mysteries, and of course forever searching for the peach of longevity, the mysterious symbol in Chinese alchemy of the philosopher's stone. And perhaps it has to go to the mysterious rabbit who guards the moon in order to find the tree of everlastingness. But all these legends and symbols have to do with this mysterious psychic self, which the Oriental does not regard as a heavy, burdensome spiritual reality, but rather as a delightful and wonderful creature, filled with the love of life and of living, wise and witty and thoughtful, and nourished, of course, upon the most ethereal and delightful of diets, nourished on things far more wonderful than any food that man has in the material world. Of course, the same kind of food which is referred to in the New Testament, where the Master says, I have bread ye know not of. The soul, therefore, lives on a nutrition of several kinds. It lives from experience, it lives from space, it lives from the supersensuous atmosphere, which extends beyond and around man. It lives in idealism, on truth, beauty, hope. It passes through innumerable moods, growing from doubts to certainty. The soul is not always wise, nor was it always good. The soul is not perfect, but it is infinitely wiser than the body which it inhabits, because it was there long before the body, and has the intuitive knowledge of bodies gained from great living. The soul may be wrong, and at some stages of its evolution it is selfish and benighted. But the gradual motion of it is toward a maturity which cannot be captured in the concept of any one embodiment or life. Now the Chinese, the Buddhists, the Hindus, and some of the Greeks, and some of the Persians, and some of the Muslims, also agree on something else. Namely, that in each embodiment of the individual, there is a time somewhere in life when body and soul come the nearest together. In other words, there comes a time when the body more or less perfects or completes the experience which the soul can bestow at any given time into one pattern or situation. Only a small ray or part of the psychic self can enter embodiment at one time, because long before this period in our growth, the soul has become a so many splendored thing that you couldn't possibly lock it within one body. It is therefore, we will say, something of this nature. Suppose the psychic self has gradually intensified within its own experience over many lives the concept of music. And so it's in its embodiment or in its body, it inevitably lures or leads the personality toward the appreciation and practice of music. And let us suppose, what is not always to be supposed, namely that the body cooperates, which in itself is quite an achievement in most cases. And that environment makes this possible, for many elements must come in. If this music is not achieved by the soul, there will be psychic stress and pressure, and we will begin to develop abnormalities, which are conflicts between the psyche and the body, or the personality. But assuming that the soul has its way in this, and that the individual does become a musician, and learns and studies and achieves a degree of virtuosity, there must and does come a time when the body has received all that the soul can confer in that particular. In other words, the body can carry on and follow the soul to a certain point in the achievement of knowledge. Then the body and the soul must grow together, because neither one of itself goes any further. At this point, the soul ceases to become the direct instructor of the body and must become a fellow seeker with it. And sometimes it is necessary for the body to take the dominant position and go out and gain experience or knowledge for the further enrichment of the soul. So there is a kind of partnership between these two parts of man's nature. And we come to a time which many persons have experienced and have seen in others, where it seems that the resources in a direction are exhausted. The young child can go to school for a certain number of years and then it just doesn't learn anymore. The individual goes to a certain level in his business and there he remains because he is either afraid to take a further step or lacks certain abilities and capacities necessary for it. Thus there comes this time when the energies of the soul are no longer sufficiently specialized to advance the purposes of the body. Well, we must remember, of course, that the purposes of the body are only one of the concerns of the psychic nature, and therefore it may not, in all cases, be adequate to them. Then the psyche must grow. So from that point on, the internal life of man again requires experience and must accept new instruction. And there are persons to whom such instruction is possible. And there are others who, because of egoism and because of the failure to recognize the needs of the psychic life, stubbornly try to force their way and come trouble. That is the reason why all human beings are not suitable to be doctors or lawyers, and why each level of humanity, and each, for that matter, every racial level, every religious and cultural level, every social level, represents the leveling off of the relationships between the psychic nature and the personality. This is the basic reason behind the Indian caste system, although gradually it was perverted until it showed very little similitude to the original idea behind it. Thus the psychic life has to grow also. It grows by new experience, and at the same time it teaches from old experience. Thus we find human beings wise in some matters and not so wise in others. And we find an infinite diversity of attainments and levels of attainment, even within the personality. So that in some things the individual has sound judgment, and in others he has not. These represent the totalities of experience patterns as they react. Now there also are times in which the psychic life impels the personality to activities which the body is incapable of sustaining. And we find therefore conflict and inconsistency. We find also that under certain conditions man has a general sense of soul power without coordinated means of manifesting this, and as a result he may develop delusions of grandeur. He may become a dictator, not because he really wants to dictate, but because of the pressure of the power of psychic life over material obstruction. All these elements and factors the Greeks took into consideration in their very elaborate studies of man's psychic nature, and for these reasons they are definitely entitled to be regarded as the true inventors and discoverers of what we call psychology today. They were already working with a very noble and wonderful concept of soul and soul power. As might be assumed or suspected, a basic diagram like your 47th proposition may be extended diagrammatically, symbolically, philosophically, and mathematically into many, many different departments of life. Pythagoras declared that in everything that you study, in everything that you think about, in every problem that faces you, first of all, triangulate. In other words, find your three essential points, where everything in the universe moves from 3 points, or assumes 3 relations among the parts of itself, and also occupies 3 dimensions in relationship to other things. Thus, to triangulate any mystery is to approach its solution. For 3 in the form of triangulation is the solution of everything, because 3 is the immutable nature of being itself. Those of you who have traveled extensively, perhaps, among primitive peoples, will recognize that while among many civilized nations the Trinity has become a very positive number of divinity, where peoples live close to nature in a primitive or aboriginal relationship, the number 4 is nearly always associated with God. Your Hopis, Navajos, and Zunis of the American Southwest represent God by the number 4 and by a square. They consider the earth to consist of an area bordered by 4 sacred mountains, which are the abodes of the gods. They have 4 directions of space and 4 sacred colors. And in almost all of their diagrams, either the square or the cruciform appears as a divine symbol. Therefore, we may say that those creatures close to nature, arising from the study of natural phenomena, nearly always have recognized and worshipped the number 4. These same people have peculiar veneration for the Earth Mother. And wherever you have matriarchal religion, you have the psychological implication of the number 4. And let us not forget that matriarchal religion is one of the earliest forms, and that for many thousands of years, most of the world was ruled by matriarchal systems, long before the patriarchal systems even came into existence. In Egypt, for example, the entire descent through the entire dynastic period of Egypt was on the side of the mother and not on the side of the father. And it was always among the brood families and among most of the primitive peoples of the world, the matriarchal system was supreme. And wherever it was, God was represented by the number 4, by the cross or the square. Later, in more highly civilized cultures, where the archetypal designs began to change within the psychic life of man. The shift from the square to the triangle took place, or from the 4 to the 3. But the 4 and the 3 did represent the primary manifestations of deity in substance or in essence. Because deity as 3 was to the Pythagoreans, remember the 1 and 2, they did not consider to be basic numbers. To them, the 1 and 2 were principles, and 3 and 4 were the first numbers. Therefore, 3 and 4 stood in the place of 1 and 2 as symbols of unity and diversity. And in the Pythagorean concept of number, the 3 represented the concept of a divine totality of creative power, and 4 represented the manifestation of that power in the sphere of existence. God in nature was 3, in manifestation was 4. Therefore, the 4 was merely the objectification of the 3 out of its own nature. So that in the Egyptian rites it is said that Isis was not only the wife of Osiris, but also his sister, his mother, and his daughter, bearing all relations, because actually Isis was merely the deity made manifest through the great objectification of its power. Therefore, the unmanifested, by union with the manifested, produces that which is in some things manifest and in some things not manifest, the soul. So the soul possesses or contains within itself the attributes of that which is manifested and not manifest. It contains the combination of that which is immovable and that which can only be moved. Therefore, it is said to be self-moving. It is in turn moved by the immovable cause of itself and imparts motion to that which is less than itself. In the soul, consequently, we have the manifested attributes of these primordial patterns. And these primordial patterns are set forth in your angle of the hypotenuse. This line also, ascending by an acute angle, incidentally further recognizes or testifies to the gradual ascent of the soul, which advancing upon a surface gradually achieves a summit. For without ascending directly, it reaches the top, and without descending directly, it reaches the bottom. Therefore, the motion of the soul was to the Egyptians likened to the various inclination of the poles of planets. For according to them and to our present consideration, the various inclinations of planetary poles indicate the life and development upon those planets. And if the inclination of the Earth's axis changed a few degrees, our entire way of life would be totally altered. Thus, this inclination of the psychic axis determines to a degree the relation of the soul, producing a night and day of the soul by an inclination of its axis, producing also sleeping and waking, which are equivalent to day and night, and producing also seasons within the soul, as Plato tells us. So that the soul has its winters and its summers, and it has within man a total astronomical existence based also upon Pythagorean mathematics. And that finally the soul in all of its effulgency and beauty is actually the perfect dodecahedron, the most perfect of all the symmetrical solids. And as this is the fifth solid, and Pythagoras was the one who discovered in his time that there are only 5 symmetrical solids, or were known in his day to be only 5, and that the dodecahedron was the most perfect of these solids, being associated with the hierarchical number 12. but that this was the design or figure of the soul, and that by the interlacing of various mathematical forms, these solids were generated. And these solids, because this is the fifth solid, was called the quintessentia, or the fifth essence, or the fifth element. And Paracelsus from Hohenheim, of course, the alchemist, says that this fifth element was azot, the universal agent. And when he was asked what it was, he said it is the agent which combines the four elements, earth, fire, air, and water. On the level of science, this agent is called ether, the permeator, the hypothetical medium. And in man, this etheric essence is the psychic life which binds the body of the elements and is supreme over them, and is the fifth Veda of India, the secret book of soul control. All this number, therefore, combines again into the number 5, which is the soul itself. And the 5 powers of the soul are the sensory powers known to man. And the symbol of the soul was a 5-pointed star. And this star was supposed by Agrippa and even Leonardo da Vinci to be composed or to be made of the 5 extremities of the human body, so that the individual standing spread eagle, his head, arms, and legs, formed a 5-pointed star. This star, of course, was the symbol of the psychic integration in man. The star is nearly always associated with the Messiah, and the star is also associated with the psychic currents within the human body. The 5-pointed star is the symbol of health or of healing among the Pythagoreans, because soul is the eternal physician, and that in which the soul is so placed that it is the upright 5-pointed star cannot be subject to evil. This was also the protection against evil, for when placed upon the foot place of a door, or upon the jamb of a door, immediately prevented evil spirits from entering. You'll remember the Flyfoot cross, as it was called, which appears in the story of Faust. He had this drawn upon the doorway of his room, and Mephisto could not enter until the 5-pointed star was turned, so that the one point did not face him. Having entered, Mephisto then found that to leave he must again face the one point of the reverse star. He could not go, and Faust taunts him by saying, "Why to the chimney not withdraw?" And Mephisto answers, "For gods and demons 'tis the law, wherein they came they must withdraw." And so we have the story of this mysterious 5-pointed star, which of course is the symbol of the soul, and is a repetition of the hypotenuse, or the number 5, in connection with the 47th proposition. Thus we find that this proposition, in substance, is the story of the soul, and as such gives us perhaps a little clearer understanding of what the ancients meant by this term. It was this growing up of a consciousness within body, a consciousness derived from man's contact with environment, the gaining a certain knowledge of himself. For it is by this knowledge which is earned by the sweat of his brow, and not this knowledge bestowed upon him by heaven, that man earns his place in the universal plan. Man must earn his own salvation, and the means of earning is through the powers of the soul. And the soul, therefore, finally in its completeness, blazes out as the mysterious pentagram, or 5-pointed star. And wherever it shines, there is a symbol that the perfect soul is born, that the messianic soul is created within man, and therefore that the mystery of the redemption is by the Christ in you, the hope of glory. And this Christ within is the Christian exposition of the mystery of the psychic self. For this Christ is the messianic soul, the oversoul, in which we find the power which, if it be raised or lifted up, shall draw all other things unto it. And this mystery is so beautifully set forth in the Pythagorean theorem that I think it is well worth our meditation until next week.